There we go. We're there in Matthew chapter 5. Once again, we are going through the Sermon on the Mount. And as you've noticed, there are many, many different topics. And one of the more challenging topics potentially is what we're about to read here, or what we had read there, is look at Matthew 5:33 again. It says again, "Ye have heard that it have been said by them of old time, Thou shalt not forswear thyself, but shalt perform unto the Lord thine oaths." The title for the sermon this morning is Making Oaths and Commitments. Making Oaths and Commitments. Now, this might be relevant because we're coming into the new year very shortly, in a few weeks, and it is very common amongst many people. People like to make New Year's resolutions, don't they? They like to say, hey, you know what? I'm coming to the end of 2025, and there are things that I would like to change. There are things I would like to do. You know, there are things in my own life that maybe I haven't been living righteously the way that I should be in 2025. So in 2026, I would like to make some changes. And so often we come to the end of the year, we make some maybe commitments, too strong of a word. We have some goals potentially that we want to achieve. So maybe this sermon, we can apply that to that criteria potentially. But you know, Jesus Christ is telling us about something that was being taught in the Old Testament there. And if you want, keep your finger there. Come with me to Leviticus 19. Come with me to Leviticus 19. Okay, come with me to Leviticus 19. So once again, he's following the same format that he has before. He's teaching. He said, look, you've heard this teaching from the Old Testament. And then Jesus digs in a little deeper, right? Like previously we had seen, you've heard, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not murder. Awesome. But do you have anger in your heart without a cause, you know? And Jesus Christ is telling us, you know, it's great that you don't haven't murdered anybody, but what about that which leads to murder? What about the anger that ends up leading you to commit murder? You know, is that something that you might be struggling with, all right? So, you know, instead of just thinking that you're right before God because you haven't murdered, what about the anger that you have within you, right? And then he talks about, divorce and adultery. He goes, oh, look, you've not committed adultery, but what about the adultery that is in your heart when you lust for someone? Of course, lusting for someone will eventually lead to actual physical adultery. And so Jesus Christ is adding another layer, a deepness to a spiritual teaching. So once again, he's saying, look, you've heard of old, thou shalt not forswear thyself, but shalt perform unto the Lord thine oaths. Well, he's actually quoting from Leviticus 19. Look at Leviticus 19 and verse number 12. Leviticus 19 and verse number 12. It says, "And ye shall not swear by my name falsely, neither shalt thou profane the name of thy God. I am the Lord." All right? So we should not make a false oath or declaration using God's name. I promise by God's name that I'm going to accomplish this or that. You know, this also applies to preaching. That when I come and I open God's word to you and I'm like, "Thus saith the Lord," I better not say something false. I better not say, this is what God says, and I'm just making up my own opinions, bringing my own wisdom to the equation. All right, it's not that bringing my own opinion is a bad thing in of itself, but if I'm turning the commandments of men into doctrine, or the doctrines of men into commandments of God, then I'm doing that falsely. I'm using God's name in a false way. Another way that Leviticus 19 refers to it is, "Neither shalt thou profane the name of thy God." All right? Now, when we think about the word profane, we think about how we often use it. We use profanity, right? Sometimes people use God's name in exchange for profanity, right? Instead of saying a swear word or whatever, they might say, "Oh my God," or something like that, right? And that is a common saying amongst many young people in Australia. "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God." You know, you're profaning the name of God. You're using it in a false tense where it's got no meaning, no purpose. You know, this is one of the 10 commandments. You know, "Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain." When you use God's name in such a empty way, worthless way, you know, God says, "I'm not going to hold you guiltless. You will be held responsible for the way you use my name." All right? So we don't want to profane the name of God. We don't want to blaspheme his name. We don't want to use his name in a vain way. And we also don't want to make false oaths, things that we're not going to be committed to by using God's name. All right? So Jesus Christ is quoting something that is found in the Old Testament. Now come back with me to Matthew 5. Matthew 5 and verse number 34. So again, he's just repeating what we already heard from the Old Testament, and now he digs in a little deeper. Verse number 34. But I say unto you, swear not at all. Okay, now swear is don't make an oath. Don't make a promise at all. Neither by heaven, for it is God's throne, nor by the earth, for it is his footstool, neither by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. All right, so let's stop there for a moment. So we already know we should not make oaths by God's name. You know, by God's name, I promise I'm going to whatever. All right? Why should we be very careful with the oaths and the promises that we make? It's because man, very largely, we won't really keep our promises. You know, we have weaknesses and failings, and the things that we might be committed to today, tomorrow we may have a change of mind. Or we might find that we're incapable of fulfilling the oath that we've made, okay? And often, the reason we're incapable of fulfilling the promise that we made is because we're making oaths or promises that are outside of our control. You can't control the Lord's name, or you can't control heaven. You've got no influence in these areas. This is God's realm. This is God's power. And you're making these promises by this power. Who are you to make a promise by these powers that you have no control over? Not only by the Lord's name, but even what is in heaven. For it is God's throne, it says, verse number 34. And it continues. Maybe I can't make a promise based on the Lord's heaven or his throne, but maybe I can make promises based on earthly matters. You know, sometimes people might say, look, I promise by, on the grave of my mother that, I did not do this. I did not do that. Yeah, you're probably right. Or I promise by the life of my mother or something like that, right? What does that mean? I promise by the grave of my mother. People are saying, look, I'm telling you the truth. And, what is holding me to account of this truth is that my mother is long buried and the honor of her life and death are in the words that I'm speaking. If I'm lying, then I'm disgracing my mother's tomb, okay, or my mother's grave. All right, well, maybe you might say, well, you know what, I should swear by earthly matters, but then he says in verse number 35, nor by the earth, okay, for it is his footstool. The Lord rests his feet on the earth, as it were. His presence is on the earth just as much as his presence is in heaven. Neither by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. And the great king, obviously, is Jesus Christ. Neither shalt thou swear by thy head. Well, what about if I swear on myself? What did they say when I was in primary school? I promise, I cross my heart, hope to die. I don't know how it was. Does anyone know how that saying goes? I swear, man, I cross my heart, hope to die. Okay, maybe I swear and make a promise based on my own life. Well, neither shalt thou swear by thy head, because thou canst not make one hair white or black. I've got some white hairs now. I didn't make it white. I guess I could make it black if I use, hair dye. But really, I'm not turning it black itself. I'm just covering up what its true color is, right? So you can't even swear by your own life or your own physical attributes. You can't control your hair color. You can't control your life. You don't know when you're going to die. You don't know, you might suffer an illness and, I promise to do this or that, but what if you lose your legs? You can't even make a promise based on your own physical presence. So then he says in verse number 37, but let your communication be yea, yea, or yes, yes, nay, nay, or no, no. For whatsoever is more than these cometh of evil. The word evil there means harmful. You make more than a promise of just yes or no, this can be very harmful upon you, okay? Because you may not be able to fulfill the commitment that you're making. So, Jesus Christ is just essentially telling us, be very careful about the words that come out of your mouth. Be careful about the promises, the oaths, the vows, the commitments that you make. This is something serious in the eyes of God. We should take this serious as well. That what we commit to, we end up fulfilling, all right? Now, what does it mean that whatsoever is more than these cometh of evil? What could happen if you make a vow or commitment that is outside of your control? You know, you make a commitment by God's throne, or you promise by God's name that you'll do something. What is the evil that may befall you? Well, keep your finger there and come with me to James 5. Come with me to James 5, please. James 5 and verse number 12, because James repeats the teaching of Christ here. In James 5 and verse number 12, James repeats the teaching, but he adds another layer, which is actually consistent with the Old Testament, okay? In James 5, verse number 12, James 5, verse number 12, it reads, "But above all things, my brethren, swear not, neither by heaven, neither by the earth, neither by any other oath, but let your yea be yea, and your nay, nay." Then he says these words, "lest ye fall into condemnation." Okay? Condemnation is like to be damned. Or, you know, obviously as God's people, we're not going to be damned to hell. Okay? But God will judge us. God holds the words that we speak to our account. The things we promise, the things we commit to, God is holding us to account. Even if you forget, right? I forgot I made that promise. God doesn't forget. God will hold you to your word. And if God sees you that you're not fulfilling your promises, your oaths, and your vows, you will find yourself under condemnation. You're going to come under God's judgment, okay? God will judge you. God will chastise you. God will correct you, okay, if you make a vow and you can't keep it. This is why at the end of it all, instead of, disgracing your words or disgracing the objects by which you made a promise to, or disgracing the name of God, profaning his name, it is just better not to make any vows. That's why it's better, okay? Because you're not going to blaspheme potentially or use God's name in vain, and you're not going to ruin your reputation if you can't fulfill something you've committed to. All right. Now, we've got to stop there for a moment, okay? Because then, you know how many doctrines have extremes? You can be extreme one way or extreme the other way, and they're both wrong, okay? And so always with doctrine, you need to come and find the balance in light of the whole scriptures. Everything that is contained in the Bible will keep you in a balanced position, all right? Now, what I mean by this is, one extreme is obviously, every time you do something, or, are you going to come to work today? I promise by God's name I'm going to be at work tomorrow. Tomorrow. Well, you don't know. What if you die? You don't use the Lord's name unnecessarily. It can become a very vain thing. You're using God's name in vain. Obviously, that's one extreme, to be making oaths in areas of that area that you have no control over. But another extreme is, well, I'll just commit to nothing. I'm just not like, are you coming to work tomorrow? I don't know. I better not make any commitments. It's like, well, if I can't even rely on you coming to work tomorrow, you're fired, right? Like, there's another extreme where, you're just like, I'm just not going to make any kind of, decision. I'm not going to make any kind of commitments, because what if I fail to do so? Obviously, that's another extreme, okay? Obviously, when your boss is asking you, coming in next week, as far as as far as what is within your control, yeah, I'm going to be there next week, right? Like, I'm going to be there. Yes, yeah, yay. No, yay, yay. These are the words that we should use, of course, okay? But to say make no commitments or make no vows, well, then you've got another extreme, because then you'll never get married. No one will ever get married, because no one will ever make any vows, all right? But it's obviously making vows outside of your control, or invoking God, or invoking an object that is not within your control. And so really the teaching that you should take out of this is, whatever I commit to is something that is within my control. The reason I can go and make a vow to my wife, till death do us part. And look, making a vow is a serious commitment. Like, going into marriage ought to be considered extremely serious. The celebrant or the pastor, whoever it is, will say something like, before God and these witnesses, do you commit yourself to this person, like in richer and poorer, in sickness and in health, at exclusion of all others? Do you so promise? I do. You're making a vow, you're making a commitment before God, before witnesses. All of you can hold me to account for the words that I'm making. So, one extreme is like no vows. Okay, you're never going to get married then. But no, the reason I can make that vow to my wife is because it is within my control. If we become poor, it is in my control whether we're going to sort out our lives together and stay committed one to another, no matter what happens. Even within riches. The number one reason people get divorced is financial reasons. It's often because there's not enough to make ends meet, okay? And people are struggling in that area. But another reason why people get divorced is when there's too many riches. When people are just excessively wealthy. And then it's like, you know what? We're so excessively wealthy, we don't even need to be committed one to another anymore. We can get divorced. You have plenty, I have plenty, and we can start new lives, all right? But we are essentially making that commitment because we have control over that decision. Or in sickness and in health. You know what? I promised my wife, it doesn't matter how sick she becomes, I'm going to be by her side. And she made the same commitment. You know what, Kevin, if you are a paraplegic, quadriplegic, I'm going to be by your side till death do us part. This is our commitment one. This is something we are promising in our control. I can't control sickness or health. I can't control, riches or I guess I can if I refuse to work, but you know what I mean, all right? But I can control my commitment to you no matter how difficult times get, all right? And when we enter into that marriage, we essentially say, look, God, you are my witness here, and everyone else that's present, our family and friends that are witnessing this, they're going to hold us to account, and if we don't fulfill our vow and our promise, what an embarrassment. Like how much of a shame it is that we've said these words. And you know what? God's not going to hold you guiltless if you break your commitments. There are going to be consequences. There is going to be a judgment that comes from God. Okay, so we need to be careful about the words that we make. Now, keep your finger there. Sorry, where are you guys at the moment? Matthew 5? We can turn away from Matthew 5, actually. Come with me to Numbers chapter 30, please. Come with me to Numbers chapter 30, please. Numbers chapter 30. Be careful about what you commit to. Be careful about the words that come out of your mouth. Be careful how you use God's name, all right? And again, for young people, this, oh my God, you need to take it out of your vocabulary, okay? It's horrible. It's honestly, it seems like an innocent thing, but it is horrible, okay? And then people replace it with, oh my gosh, or just, oh my. It's like, look, you've gone enough. Just leave. It's hard. I'm not angry at you. Like, I get it. I know that, when something gets stuck in your system, in your habits, it's so difficult to get it out. Like, in Australia, using vulgarity, like saying the F words and like just horrible words one to another is such a cultural thing, but it's so filthy and disgusting. We need to be careful about the communication that comes out of our mouth. And it's always hard the tongue, the Bible says, is like untamable. Like, it is one of the most difficult things to control. And so getting these things out of your life, these habits, you need to control them. Okay? God's holding you account for what you speak. That's why I actually like being an introvert in general, because I don't say a lot. Like, behind the pulpit, I say a lot. And as a pastor, I have to say a lot because people come asking questions. But generally speaking, I don't like to say much, or I don't like to claim something that I don't know if it's true. Like, I want to be careful about my words because I know how important it is. God looks at that. Like, God listens to every word, every idle word that He said. God is going to hold us to account one day for the things that we speak. Anyway, look at Numbers chapter 30, please. Numbers chapter 30. So this is about vows, and then we're looking at vows, and then we'll talk about how we can make commitments or decisions, ourselves without breaking the laws that God's put around these things, okay? But in Numbers chapter 30, in verse number 1, it says, "And Moses spake unto the heads of the tribes concerning the children of Israel, saying, This is the thing which the Lord hath commanded. If a man vow a vow unto the Lord." Now, it's not saying make vows. It just says if you do this, if a man does this, okay? "Or swear an oath to bind his soul with a bond, he shall not break his word. He shall do according to all that proceedeth out of his mouth. All right? What you promise to, God says you need to keep that. So don't make a vow. In other words, right? Just say, look, just because you often break your vows. You know, I mean, I can probably look at my life and there are many things that I've committed to that I've just not followed through. Okay? Now, I've not committed like, you know, by God's throne, I'm going to do this. But just think about your everyday normal conversations and commitments that you might make. Yes, honey, I'll fix the toilet by the end of the week or whatever. Whatever it is, right? And you don't get it done. Like, think about how many times you don't end up fulfilling the things that you want to do. But if you make an oath before God, he's going to hold you account. He expects that you're going to fulfill that. You know how I use the example that if you say, I promise by my mother's grave, or something like that, if you don't do that, you're disgracing, you know, your mother's grave and her memory. If you say, by the Lord's name, I'm going to do this, and you don't do it, you're disgracing God's name. Okay? You're bringing his name. Look, God cannot lie. All right? God is truth. And we invoke God when we can't even fulfill our commitments. Boy, be careful, right? God is expecting you to follow through with the vows that you make. Look at verse number 3. If a woman also vow a vow unto the Lord and bind herself by a bond, being in her father's house in her youth. So this is a young lady living under her parents' roof. Okay? Verse number 4. And her father hear her vow, and her bond wherewith she shall bound her soul, and her father shall hold his peace at her, then all her vows shall stand, and every bond wherewith she hath bound her soul shall stand. All right, so fathers, if your daughters make a vow, a promise to God, right, and she comes up to you, whatever that vow is, and she comes up to you and says, Dad, I made a promise to God, and you hold your peace, you're like, okay, then she needs to fulfill all the promises that she's made, okay, by God's standard. But look at verse number 5. But if her father disallow her in the day that he heareth. All right, so your daughter comes up to you, Dad, I made a vow, I made a promise. You know, this young man came up to me and asked me to marry him, and I said, yes, Dad. You know, I've made a commitment to marry this young man, okay? And on the day that you hear it, let's say you don't like this guy, like she's going to destroy your life, like this is a bad dude, all right? Well, you disallow her in the day that he heareth, okay? So let's say your daughter got engaged to some loser, 6 months ago. And then she's like, Dad, I haven't told you, but we're getting married next week. Okay, well, the day that you've heard it is the day right now that you heard it, the week leading up to the wedding, okay? It says here, so let's read again, verse 5. But if her father disallow her, so he can say, look, no, you're not. I know you made that vow, I know you made that promise, but I do not approve, okay? On the day that you hear it says, not any of her vows or of her bonds wherewith she have bound her soul shall stand, and the Lord shall forgive her, because her father disallowed her. All right? So again, this teaches us about the authority structure. Fathers, you have authorities over your daughter. All right? If your daughter makes a vow, you can actually, on the day you hear it, you can say, no, we're going to disallow that. I don't want you to fulfill that promise. Okay? So if your kid say, if your daughter says something foolish, promises something foolish, she can be forgiven by God. God's not going to judge her or chastise her because you have the authority to say no. Okay? But if it's the next day, Dad, I'm going to marry this loser, and the next day you think about it 24 hours later, I don't want this to happen. No, you can't. Too late. Okay? You got to speak up on the day of on the day that you hear it. Okay? Now, this continues on. This is also about wives, and you can read it in your own time. I don't want to go through this whole thing, okay? But this teaches us that if a wife does the same thing, she makes a vow, a commitment to God, but on the day that her husband hears it, he can also disallow it and say, no, honey, you're not going to do that, and God will forgive, that wife for making that promise, making that vow, okay? You can read it in your own time. You'll see it, okay? But again, this kind of just reinforces, or not just kind of, it does reinforce that the man is the head of the wife or the woman, okay? The father is the head of his daughters, and husbands, you're the head of your wife. All right? So if your wife makes a promise, I don't know, my wife comes up to me, Kevin, I promise that I'm going to go visit Valerie next week. All right? We're going to catch up over coffee. And I'm like, no, honey, it's not going to happen. Right? For whatever, look, I'm not going to be stupid. Like, no, I'm the man. Why don't you check with me first? It's like, it's okay, all right? Right? But like, obviously, if there's something, honey, you actually forgot we had these other commitments, right? Then it'll be forgiven. Like, she's not going to be held to account by God for the commitment that she made, right? But if she says, next week I'm going to meet up with Valerie on Tuesday for a coffee, and I think about it for a couple of days, and then like a few days later, you know what, honey? No, it's not going to happen. No, too late. Okay? It's on the day that you hear it, okay? Vows are important. And when you hear a vow, especially men, if you're over certain people, God is holding you responsible for either approving or disapproving of that decision that is being made. But it's got to be made immediately. It's got to be made on that same day, all right? Otherwise, the vow is before God, okay, and needs to be kept. All right? I'm just showing you some examples here in the Bible about how important it is to make a vow. And so Jesus says, look, instead of breaking your vows, which probably happens all the time, okay, and it's just not good, it's sin against you, God's going to hold you to account, just don't make these kinds of vows. All right? It's better that way. Can you come with me to Deuteronomy 23? Deuteronomy chapter 23, please. Deuteronomy chapter 23. Now, in the Old Testament, the Israelites could make two types of offerings. They had mandatory offerings that they had to do, okay? Certain feasts, they were to bring a lamb, or they were to bring some grain that they grew out of the ground, and these were mandatory things that they were to do, okay, to keep the commandments. But the Bible also speaks about a free will offering, where it was up to, you might just be so blessed by God. You've committed, you've done your mandatory requirements before God, and you're like, you know what, I'm going to give above and beyond to God. It's your free will. It's up to you. You don't have to, but you can if you want to. It is completely in your hands, the free will offering. But look at Deuteronomy chapter 23 and verse number 21. When thou shalt vow a vow unto the Lord thy God, thou shalt not slack to pay it. For the Lord thy God will surely require it of thee, and it would be sin in thee. There it is again, right? You make a vow, and you can't keep it, you break it, God sees it as sin to you, okay? Which is why he's not going to hold you guiltless, which is why you come into condemnation, etc., etc., all right? But then it says in verse number 22, but if thou shalt forbear to vow, it shall be no sin in thee. Oh, I'm not going to make a vow. All right, there will be no sin against you, okay, in that regard. Look at verse number 23. That which is gone out of thy lips, thou shalt keep and perform, even a free will offering, according as thou hast vowed unto the Lord thy God, which thou hast promised with thy mouth. All right, so if in the Old Testament, if they were like, you know what, I've already given my tithe, I've given my first fruits, I've done the feasts, and, God's blessed me so much, I want to give more above and beyond, it's better to just go and do it quietly, okay? Then make a vow. God, I promise before your throne and on the earth that I'm going to bring this free will offering to you. Because here's the thing, when you make the vow, it's no longer a free will offering. It was a free will offering. But now that you've made a vow to God about that free will offering, it's no longer free will. Now it's mandatory that you end up fulfilling that commitment that you've made to God. So this is the challenge with vows. You're locked in. You either have free will or you want to lock yourself in. All right? Now, when it comes to marriage, I was prepared to lock myself in. Okay? And again, it's in my control. I can fulfill my side of that agreement with my spouse. All right? Any failure is with me. I am not saying that I have control over God, or of the earth, or even the color of my hair. I am locking in my marriage. I'm no longer going to have eyes for any other. I'm not going to seek love from any other. I'm locking it in. All right. Once you're married, there's no more free will to find another woman or find another man. Okay, it's done. It's locked in. You did have free will in the past. You know, Pastor, who do I marry? Do I marry the blonde or the red hair or the brunette? It's free will. All right? There's pretty much only a couple of requirements in the Bible. That she's saved and that you love her. Like, that's pretty much it. Like, there isn't much more as far, I mean, obviously there are words of wisdom about who you want to find, okay? But as far as God is concerned, there's not much, okay? You have free will choice in marriage. But once you make that vow, you are locked in. This is it. This is the one for your life, okay? And that ought to be a good thing. That ought to be a thing worth rejoicing over, okay? But you make a commitment to God. You know, by God's throne, I'm going to, offload my free will. All right, you can make something mandatory. But man, you better be careful about the commitment you've made, because if you break it, and it's very realistic that you will break it. Because you're a human being. You have very limited control over your life, that you will disgrace the name of God, and that is going to hold you to account, okay? You may very find yourself under heavy judgment of God because you've disgraced his name. Can you come with me to Psalm 15, please? Come with me to Psalm 15, Psalm 15. If you say to me, Pastor, there was a time I made a vow to God, I made a promise, but I've broken it. What now? I mean, it's like any time you sin, bro. It's not like, obviously, God takes it very seriously, okay? You've broken your vows, you've broken that, you've sinned against the Lord. So what do you do when you sin? Like any time. You just be merciful to me, a sinner, right? That's what you do. You run to God, brokenhearted, seeking his grace, his forgiveness, his mercy. All right? Don't be lifted up with pride. Man, you want God's forgiveness? Get the pride out of your life. Admit you've done wrong. Admit you failed in your fulfillment of that vow. I'm not saying break the vow. I'm not saying, like, you made a vow, keep the vow. Of course, that's the commandment. But let's say you have broken the vow, and just like any time you sin, you go to God and say, God, be merciful to me. I'm a sinner, God. I'm weak. I'm hopeless. I don't know. Do you do that? That's what I do to God when I sin against him. I mean, it stops me from being big-headed, that's for sure. Like, I know I'm a sinner. You know what? The longer I grow in the Lord, the more mature I become, the more I become like Christ in my spiritual walk, the more I realize just how bad of a sinner I am. I realize more and more and more how much of a failure I am. I didn't realize when I got saved. Yeah, I'm a sinner, yeah. But when I learn more about who God is, about his holiness, about how important the words, even the words that come out of our mouth are, the vows, the promises, the commitments we make that we've broken over the years for different reasons. I'm thinking about God. You're a God who cannot lie. You're a God that never changes. You're a holy God. You're angry at the wicked every day. And when I look at the Bible, all I see is my failings over and over and over again. So when I sin against the Lord, I'm just brokenhearted. God, please forgive me. You know what I'm made of. You know my weaknesses. I'm a failure. Lord, please be merciful. Forgive me. Please hold back your chastisement. Or if you are going to chastise me for my profit, can it be a little bit softer? Please don't chastise me, in anger and in wrath. Please look upon me with mercy. Okay? I don't know how it is that you confess your sins before God. All right? Is it just like, oh God, I sinned again. Please forgive me. Next day, oh God, I'm honestly brokenhearted, and it keeps me humble. It keeps me humble. And you're very prideful to say that you're humble. I'm not always humble. But what I'm saying, when I come before God in his presence and I see the holy God that he is and the sinner that I am, man, how dare I stand up before God and beat my chest and think I'm something bigger? I am just a sinner, And so, if you've made vows, I'm just saying, beg God for mercy, okay? If you've broken those vows, just beg God for his mercy, all right? And, God is very long-suffering. God is such a good God. He's such a good God, all right? So look, just don't make the vows. Just stop being foolish with the words that come out of your mouth, All right? And what this leads to eventually, brethren, the thing that we want to take out of this is that when we make commitments, that you need to assess, is it in my control or is it not? And if it's not in your control, don't commit. All right? Let's continue. Let's go to Psalm 15. Let's go to Psalm 15 and verse number 1. Psalm 15 and verse number 1. Lord, Psalm 15, verse number 1. Lord, who shall abide in thy tabernacle? Who shall dwell in thy holy hill? You know, being in the tabernacle of God, the temple, the house of God, is speaking about being in his presence, being close to God. David is asking the question, Lord, who are you close to? You know, who do you love to have in your presence? Who are those that are just right by your side? Who is there at your right hand? He gives us a list of things in these verses. But then we get to verse number 4. It says this. It says, in whose eyes a vile person is contemned, but he that honoreth them that fear the Lord, okay? And then, he that sweareth, that's making a vow, to his own hurt, and changeth not. There are many attributes that God is looking for in an individual to be in his presence, to be in his tabernacle, in his holy hill. And one of those attributes is someone that swears, makes an oath to his own hurt, and changeth not. Like you've made a vow, you've made a commitment, okay? And you realize, boy, what a foolish decision I made there. To keep this vow hurts me. I'm not getting anything out of it. You know, or maybe it's costing you more than you realized. But you don't change. Well, you say, well, I made this vow to God anyway. You know what? When God looks at that person, I'm not going to break my vow. I'm going to do it anyway, even if it's to my hurt. God says, that's someone that stands in my presence. That's someone of high integrity. Okay, that's someone that can be with me, and God is pleased by these things. You know, if you have made a vow, serious vow to God, or by his name, and you're keeping it, you know, I want you to know that should you have done it? Probably not by the standard of Jesus, but if you have, and you're committed to it, and you're not willing to let it go, that God looks favorably upon it, even if it's to your own hurt. Okay? Sometimes we can say foolish things, commit to stupid things, but God sees us with our right intentions to keep that, even though we probably shouldn't have done it. Okay, I'm not talking about sin. I'm just saying you're making a commitment about something that you probably shouldn't have made. But he sees that you're just, no, Lord, I don't want to sin against you. Lord, I'm going to hold on to this vow, even though it damages me. God says, this is someone that stands in my presence. Okay, God looks favorably upon it. Okay? And so, you know what? With my marriage, okay, before God and these witnesses, and does that mean marriage and every wedding and marriage is perfect and every wife is perfect? Every marriage has conflict and disagreements, and you know, the longer you're married, the more you realize the faults of your spouse. And you know what? But you know what? No, Lord, I made a commitment. Lord, this is a woman that I said till death do us part. And it can look attractive. Maybe there's another woman out there. She's got faults. She's a sinner. She's got problems. You think getting divorced and remarried is going to fix your life? No, when you dwell with sinners, you're going to have problems. You know that? You know what? Even though my marriage is rocky, even though we have some hard times at times, you know what? I've made this vow, God. You know what? I'm going to keep it, no matter what. Because I know how serious these things are in your eyes. And God says, yeah, this is someone that's in my presence. God looks favorably upon it. And don't you think when God looks favorably upon that he's going to help you? He's going to strengthen you to maintain those vows? Say, Pastor Kevin, are you teaching us to make vows or not to make vows? Just don't make vows, honestly. But if you have, keep it. Because I don't want to see God bring great judgment upon you. But if you've broken it already, seek his mercy if you haven't already. All right? Seek his grace. Because God looks favorably upon those that are brokenhearted. And he's a God that forgives. Let's go to James chapter 4, please. Come with me to James chapter 4. Let's move the sermon a little bit about we have to make commitments to some extent, right? Like if you're going to work a job, they make you sign a document. These are your hours. This is your pay. You're like, yep, you sign it. You're making a commitment. You're making some type of agreement there, you know. Again, the other extreme is just don't promise anything. It's like, well, no, you've gone wrong, right? We have to make some level of agreements and commitments, you know. Otherwise, we'll never get anything done. We'll, you know, if let's say I'm driving home and my wife says, honey, can you pick up milk on the way? I'm like, well, I want to say yes. You know, I'm not making any vows or any agreements here, any commitments. It's like, what? I need the milk for dinner or whatever. Like, are you going to pick it up or not, right? Like, we need to have some element of stability and consistency, and otherwise it's impossible to operate in the world, okay? So we obviously don't want to go to the other extreme. But the Bible does give us some teaching. It was James 4 that I asked you to turn to, right? James 4. Look at James 4:13. I'm going to read all of these verses, and then I'm going to tell you all the bad mistakes that I've heard taught on this topic, okay? But let's look at James 4 and look at verse number 13. I'll read the whole thing. Go to now, ye that say, today or tomorrow, we will go into such a city and continue there a year, and buy and sell and get gain. Whereas ye know not what shall be on the morrow, for what is your life? It is a vapor that appeareth for a time, and then vanisheth away. For that ye ought to say, if the Lord will, we shall live, and do this or that. But now ye rejoice in your boastings. All such rejoicing is evil. Therefore to him that knoweth to do good, and doeth it not, to him it is sin. All right, let me tell you all the wrong teachings that I've heard on these verses that I've just read, okay? The first wrong teaching is when it says, today or tomorrow we will go into such a city and continue there a year, buy and sell and get gain. Okay? Whereas you shall not know what is on the morrow, for what is your life? Okay? So some people teach, I don't know if teach, but I've heard it in discussions, in conversations, that it's wrong. Like if you've got a business idea, let's say, oh man, I live on the Sunshine Coast, but in order for my business to flourish, I need to move to Brisbane because there's more people, greater population, or whatever it is, right? And so I'm going to make a decision to go to Brisbane, make a profit with my business. And well, that's wrong. That's sinful. You should not move to another city to make a profit because you don't know what your life is. It's a vapor. It could be gone tomorrow. So some people teach that. That's obviously that's stupid. Wait, well, you can never go and make a profit. There aren't times that you need to move for whatever reason. You know, the Sunshine Coast is a very unforgiving place. I always say it is the place that will spit you right out, like if you're not prepared. And look, I don't feel bad. Like I'm not saying that there are people that have come to New Life, like they've come to the Sunshine Coast because they want to get plugged into New Life Baptist Church. And they've come and they've realized it is so hard to live on the Sunshine Coast. I can't find work. I can't find a place to live, whatever it is, or I'm too far away from my network of friends and family. And they might go for a little while and then they're gone. I don't feel bad about it. I don't think they're horrible people. It's just an unforgiving place. And there are many people that have tried to live on the Sunshine Coast, and because of work and because of finances have said, look, I've got to move back to a Brisbane. I've got to move back to a Sydney. I've got to move back to a Melbourne, whatever it is. Yeah, it makes sense. Obviously, you've got priorities of taking care of your family. That is also a commandment of God. Okay, there are times that you've got to move to a different place because you need to make a living, all right? But there's one wrong teaching is like, if you're ever going to move to a place to get gain or to become more profitable, that is wrong. That's not the right teaching, okay? The other bad teaching that I've heard from here is that verse number 15, for that you ought to say, if the Lord will, we shall live and do this or that. So anytime someone makes a decision, they say, you need to say, if the Lord wills. Now look, that in of itself is not such a horrible thing. Like, of course, if the Lord wills. But it's almost like, let me give you that example once again. Let's say I'm driving home, my wife says, you know, honey, I've started cooking, but I realized I forgot I don't have this ingredient, whatever it is, right? Can you quickly pick it up on the way home? Well, if the Lord wills. What does that mean? Are you going to do it or not? I need to know because I'm in the middle of cooking and I need to know if the Lord wills. And look, you know, there are, I don't want to, because I know people mean well. I know people, If the Lord wills, if the Lord wills. Like every decision is if the Lord wills. If the Lord wills, if the Lord wills. What's really crazy about this is that we learned earlier about being careful with the name of God. And we are not to use his name in vain. Vain means empty, worthless. Like unnecessarily using God's name. And I've seen it in the Baptist world where people use God's name so empty, so worthless. Like it's got no meaning behind it. You know, am I going to see you tomorrow if the Lord wills? What does that mean? Are you coming to work tomorrow if the Lord wills? Are you coming to work or not? I need a yes or a no answer. Whatever it is, right? If the Lord wills. And so that is the wrong teaching. Like just every decision, the Lord will, if the Lord wills, if the Lord wills, you're really entering into using the Lord's name in vain. Like it's such repetitive nonsense. Okay, so some people take that teaching. Okay, the other teaching I've heard misused in this verse is verse number 17. Therefore, to him that knoweth to do good and doeth it not, to him it is a sin. So anytime you have an opportunity to do good and you don't do it, you've sinned against God. All right, and I'll use, let me use an example. Let's say I'm driving to work and I've got to start at 9 o'clock. All right, it's 5 to 9. I'm on my way to work. All right, let's say it's 10 to 9. All right, I'm on my way to work and I see someone with a broken down car. Say, well, I could help that person. I could do good in that situation, but I've got to get to work. So you're like, man, I choose work. You could have done good, and because you didn't do it, you've sinned. Some people use that. Okay, but if I went and stopped and helped him and did good and was late to work, I didn't do good at work. So I've sinned. It's like, now I've sinned no matter what I do. Which decision do I take? I've sinned. Now God's angry at me. I failed the Lord. God, please forgive me because I didn't do good in one of these areas. These are the three things that I've heard taught from all this that are just wrong. And the reason these things get taught, maybe you've done it yourself, maybe you've thought this yourself, is because they lose the context of the whole thing. Okay, now let's talk about it. Let's talk about making certain decisions and what this means in light of this passage, okay? James chapter 4, verse number 13. Go to now, ye that say, so this is what you should do if this is going to be your decision, right? Today or tomorrow we'll go into such a city and continue there a year and buy and sell and get gain. All right. This is not deciding what you're going to have for breakfast. This is not deciding whether you're going to go to stop by the grocery shop to buy milk. We're not talking about everyday, common, little decisions that we make all the time. Moving to a city from one place to another place is a big life decision. Wouldn't you agree? Like when I moved to Sydney to the Sunshine Coast, that required a lot of thought, a lot of it was a logistical nightmare. Okay, how is this going to work? Like it's a huge decision of life to move from one place to another place. We're not talking about everyday, normal life decisions here, okay? We're talking about something big. All right, verse number 14. Whereas you know not what shall be on the morrow, for what is your life? It is even a vapor that appeareth for a little time and then vanisheth away. So the thought, okay, look, you need to make a big decision, but you don't even know if you're going to live. You don't know. The only one that knows that is God, right? The only one that knows whether you're going to be able to go to that city and perform the task that you want to perform is God. You don't know that, okay? So because of that, verse number 15, for you ought to say, it is if the Lord will, we shall live and do this or that. All right. So before you make a big decision, before you make a big commitment, what should you stop to ask? Lord, do you will? Lord, is this in your will for me? Before I came to the Sunshine Coast, Lord, is it your will that I would come here and start a church? And what sometimes people talk about when we ask for the Lord's will in that, we would say something like, Lord, if it is your will, can you make it clear to me? Can you open the doors and make it easy to make that decision? And Lord, if it's not in your will, can you close all the doors and make it very hard so I know that is not what you want in my life? That's what it means. Is it God's will or is it not God's will? Not, are you going to have Wheat Bix for breakfast if the Lord wills? That's not the teaching here, okay? We're talking about making big decisions of life. Is God on board or is he not on board? You search the scriptures. Is it sin? No, it's not sin. It's in God's permissible will. All right, God, is this what you want for me? All right, and we seek the will. And look, when I pray that often to God, God, can you make it clear? And if you don't want me doing this, can you close all the doors and make it hard? And I'm so stubborn. Like, I'm such a slow learner, brethren, that when I still pursue what I want, like my life is a vapor. Like, how do I know? But anyway, I still pursue what I want. I already told God, close the doors if you don't want it to happen. I'm so stubborn and I'm such a slow learner. Like, in general, I'm a slow learner, which is why I know my Bible really well, because I've taken it slowly. Okay, I'm a slow learner. But where I still pursue my goals and it's hard and I'm like trying to break down the door that God closed and I don't even realize God closed the door. And I'm like getting frustrated. Is this not what you want, God? And it's like, hold on, I asked God to make it hard if he doesn't want me to do it. And he's done. He has answered my prayer. He has done what I've asked and I'm getting frustrated. I guess that wasn't your will, God. What was your will? What is your will, Lord? It's maybe this over here. And in my life, when I've asked the Lord for his will to make it easy, he's made things easy. He's opened the doors sometime at the last hour. He just, what must have been your will, God? Because, wow, you've opened the doors, you've made this a reality, whatever that is. So we seek, God, is this what you want for my life? To move to another city, to live out here, to make a profit out here, or is it not? All right? But look at verse number 16. It says, but now ye rejoice in your boastings. All such rejoicing is evil. All right? So if you decide to make a big decision of life, I'm going to do it. This is my decision. I have control of this. You don't even know if you're going to live. You're boasting of yourself. But when you're seeking the Lord's will, you're boasting of him, right? And then verse number 17, therefore is continuation of what we just read, all right? Therefore, to him that knoweth to do good and doeth it not, to him it is sin. So, if you're like, God, I've got to make a big decision. Is it your will? I'm searching your will, God. And God says, yes. He opens the door. He's done, this is the good path to go. And you don't do it. It is sin. Okay? That's the sin. It's not like the guy was broken down, you were late for work, you didn't help him, you sinned. It's like you sought God's will. He made it clear, yes, this is where I want you to go. And then last minute, you just decide, no, I'm not going to do that. You've sinned against the Lord. All right. I hope that kind of makes sense. So this is about making big decisions of life. You know what? Instead of making vows and empty promises that you have no control over, when it is a big call, how about you seek God? God, is this what you want from me? Is this your will for me, Lord? To move to another city and do X, Y, and Z, whatever that is? Lord, there's this girl I'm interested in. I'm thinking of marrying her. Lord, is this your will? Can you make it clear to me if I ought to pursue this or not? Big decisions of life. All right? Lord, I've applied for work. There are 3 jobs here that I could go for, Lord. I've been offered a position. I'm not sure which one to choose here, Lord. Can you make it clear what is your will in my life? These are the big decisions that we learn about in James chapter 4. So anyway, I just feel like these verses get taken instead of just reading it in the context, it gets like one verse gets taken here, one verse gets taken there, and then all these doctrines get built on these single verses when you're meant to read it all together and understand it as a whole. But the big thing, brethren, here is when we make decisions and large commitments, we need to seek for God's will. Can you turn to Luke chapter 14, please? Luke 14. So when you're making your New Year's resolutions, if that's your practice, I would never say don't do them. I think it's wise to make goals or you'll never do anything. I think it's wise to say, look, there are things that I need to do. There are things I need to change. Good. You don't have to wait for New Year's. You can do that any time of your life, really. But there's something about the new year coming that people are like, this is something I want to do. Good. All right. If that's a motivation, go. All right, good. All right. But when you make that decision, Lord, is this what you want from me? Like, let's say I make a commitment. Lord, I want to read my Bible cover to cover 3 times this year. That's my goal. Is that your will, Lord? Pretty sure it's God's will, brethren, okay, for you to read his word and to know him deeper, all right? But you don't want to make a vow. God, I promise you, Lord, that I'm going to get through my Bible 3 times this year. Well, what if you lose your eyesight this year? It's coming, like, what if right, something happens and you just can't, you don't get the time. Don't make those kinds of vows, but hey, you can set goals in life. You can ask God to help you with the goals that you have set for yourself. All right? And the first step, of course, is to ask, Lord, is this your will? Look at Luke 14. Now, the context, I'm going to rip it out of context, but the context is being a disciple for Jesus during those 3 years of ministry that he had on the earth, okay? But as he's explaining about being a disciple for him during that time, he uses this principle, which I believe we can take this principle and learn from it, okay? He says in Luke 14, verse number 28, Luke 14, 28, "For which of you, intending to build a tower, sitteth not down first and counteth the cost, whether he have sufficient to finish it? Lest haply, after he have laid the foundation, and is not able to finish it, all that behold it begin to mock him, saying, This man began to build and was not able to finish." So what's the principle that we can learn out of that? Before you make a decision, before you make a commitment to build a structure, do you have the money for it? Do you have the resources? Do you have the manpower? If you want to build a house, well, you got to buy a piece of land. Okay, but do you have a builder that can build on that land? Will the council allow you to build on that land? I mean, there's so many questions to ask. Before you throw yourself into a decision, you got to sit down and do some research and assess, am I able to complete it before you just rush into a decision? It's a good principle to live by, yeah. Okay? So, Lord, is this your will? At the same time, am I able to fulfill this? What is this teaching us? Are you in control? The things that are in your control, are they sufficient to complete the task that you're willing to do? And if you don't have that, then don't make the commitments. You don't want to be stuck halfway building a house only to find out you've run out of funds, or you find out that the council says knock it down because it was never approved in the first place, okay? People are going to mock you. People are going to laugh at you, all right? You're going to ruin your reputation. Verse number 31 says, "Or what king, going to make war against another king, sitteth not down first, and consulteth whether he is able with 10,000 to meet him that cometh against him with 20,000? Or else, while the other is yet a great way off, he sendeth an ambassage and desireth conditions of peace." Another teaching that if you're a king and you have a hostile army coming to fight against you, do you not first check your army? Am I able to fight this? They've got 20,000. I might have 10,000. You have to decide, can I win this battle with 10,000? Are they more skillful? Do we have better weapons? Can we defeat them even though we're a smaller army? Okay, you do some research. Can we fight or not? You don't just go and fight because of your pride and destroy everybody around you, destroy your kingdom, destroy your soldiers. And if you say, look, I can't win this fight, what's the next thing you do? Send ambassadors. All right? Let's try to make peace. We don't need to fight. All right? Hey, how can we appease you without you destroying us? That's the wise decision. Before we make rash, stupid decisions that either you'll be mocked at or you'll be destroyed. Same thing with your vows before God. Before you vow anything, and like, why? The Bible doesn't command us to make vows before God, by God's name. But if you really want to be locked in and remove your free will from that decision, okay. But are you going to count the cost first? Are you able to fulfill it? Because God is going to expect you to fulfill it. And if you can't, God will judge you. You fall into condemnation. All right? So decisions need to be grounded. And by the way, men, husbands, our wives need us to be stable. Like, really? Like, we need to be a solid rock for our wives, okay? And it's hard. It's a huge responsibility that God puts as the head of our wives. But our wife really wants a stable life, consistent, okay? Knowing that I can depend on my husband. No matter what happens, he's going to find a solution. He's going to find a way. I feel confident in the man that God has given me. So before we pursue some stupid, crazy project, or we come up with, let's do this or let's do that, before we make rash decisions that can hurt our marriage or hurt our families, sit down, count the cost. Can it be done? Is it in your will, God? We ask all these questions before we make that final commitment or decision, for life. Can you turn to Proverbs, please? I'm almost done. Let's just look through a few Proverbs now. Proverbs 21 and verse number 5. Let's start there. When it comes to my life, I've got so many variables, pastoring 3 churches, 11 kids. Sometimes I don't even know if the Sunshine Coast is going to spit me out. Sometimes you get so close. Is this place going to spit me out? Because it's tough to make a living here in paradise. And so I've got all these variables. Like, my daughter's married, whatever it is, right? What if we have grandkids? And I'm like, okay, if this happens, this might be the solution to that. If that happens, this might happen. This happens, this might be the way to go. Like, I've got all these things in my head. My wife thinks I think too much, right? Like, I'm not made commitment. I'm not like, this is what's going to happen. I'm just like, if these pieces fall in place here and there and blah, blah, we might have to do this or we might have to do that, right? So you've got all these thoughts in your head. And, but look at Proverbs 21, verse number 5. Proverbs 21, verse number 5, it says, the thoughts of the diligent tend only to plenteousness. But of everyone that is hasty, only to want. So we're being told here, before we make a decision, we don't want to be hasty. We don't want to just act out of emotion. This happened, all right, now that, bang. We want to be people that are diligent with our thoughts. Before we make a commitment, before we make a vow, a decision, stop, contemplate it, count the cost. Is it in God's will? Is it good? Is it in my control? Do I have the resources? All right, you start thinking about all these things, and then you eventually make that best decision for you, all right? And that leads to plenteous. But you make a very hasty, a very rushed decision, it leads to want, lacking. You won't succeed, okay, in your decision. Look at Proverbs 15 and verse number 22. Proverbs 15 and verse number 22. When you are making certain commitments or decisions, we have some advice here in Proverbs 15, verse number 22. Without counsel, purposes are disappointed, but in the multitude of counselors, they are established. So when you're going to make a big call, it's good to ask for some advice. It's good to seek people that may have a knowledge in that area and get their thoughts. All right? Without counsel, your purpose will be disappointed. All right? I'm going to, before I started the church here, I spoke to a number of pastors. I spoke to a pastor that I had that was no longer in the ministry. And I said, what is it that led you to get out of ministry? What happened? Because I don't want to. Like, if I'm going to make a commitment, I want to be long-lasting. I want it to be solid. I want to be careful about the things that might creep in and destroy me. He gave me advice. I sought pastors that had ministries on the Sunshine Coast. Why did you leave the Sunshine Coast? So these are the reasons why. And, okay, that gives me an idea. So I need to keep that in mind should something happen. You seek the words of others. And, there was my old pastor that didn't want to ordain me, but he sat me down anyway and said, you know what, when you do become a pastor, Kevin, you're going to be betrayed by your church members. They're going to hate you at times. And these are the Bible verses that got me through these hard times. All right, good. Okay, now I know that, pastoring, you're gonna be brokenhearted at times. You're gonna get very hurt at times. But I need to rely on God. These are some verses that my pastor has pointed me to that's gonna help me when I need strength to continue. Right? You get all the counsels, you get the words that can come and that can help you to make that decision, that final decision. Otherwise, you'll find that without counsel, your purposes are disappointed. Look, it doesn't mean, sometimes I sometimes even still ask people for advice. Not advice. I'm like, look, here's my situation, or here's a situation. What are your thoughts? It's not that I necessarily need to take people's advice. I just want people's thoughts, because there might be things that they're thinking about that I've not really thought about. Or they might find a gap in my thought process. And then I'm like, okay, yeah, that's actually, you're right there. So I need to find a solution for that gap, But bringing a situation, making a commitment, taking it before people is a wise thing. Getting wise people around you will help you to make better decisions. All right? Look at Proverbs 24. Proverbs 24. By the way, with counselors, with any counsel you get, whatever decision you make, you need to be held to account yourself for the decision you make. Okay? You get the counselors to hear wisdom, but the final decision is still yours, and you need to hold yourself to account for the decision you make. It is very often that people get counsel, they pursue a direction, they fail, and they blame the counselors. Now, we need to learn how to take account for ourselves. It's good to get wisdom around you, but at the end of the day, the decision is yours to make. Okay? Look at Proverbs 24, verse number 27. By the way, this is one of my life verses. When I say life verses, these are one of those verses that just get me through life. Okay? In Proverbs 24:27, it says, prepare thy work without, and make it fit for thyself in the field, and afterwards build thine house. This is the idea. You can get a lot of counsel. At the end of the day, though, when you decide to do a work, make a decision, make some sort of commitment, you got to prepare thy work without. That means before you start, okay, you do some research, and then look, so important, and make it fit for thyself in the field. The final decision must work with you. Okay? Sometimes it's like, hey, pastor, this church does things like that over here. Okay, but we're not that church. That is not our field. Or this pastor does it like that. Okay, but I'm not that pastor. He's made it fit for himself the way he wants to do it. That works for his life, that works for his family. But I need to make sure that what I do fits for me. This is why I often teach, don't upload someone's family and download it into your life. You got to make decisions and commitments and objectives and goals fit your life before you commence. And afterwards, build thou house. All right? In the Bible, the word house can also refer to family. You know what? I decided I'm going to get married to Christina. This is going to be our life. This is my job. These are my hours. These are the kids that God has given us. How we run our life has to fit my schedule, Christina's schedule. It's got to fit our strength and work around our weaknesses, always depending on how God's going to see us through. This is how we're going to chastise our kids. This is how we're going to raise our kids. This is what we're going to allow them to do. This is what we're not going to allow them to do. These are the boundaries that we've set for our family. We've made it fit for ourselves. That's why when someone says, hey, pastor, how do you do this? Speak to your husband. Speak to your wife. Make it fit for yourselves. It's your field, okay? Because just trying to imitate someone else will not be successful for you. Proverbs 16, please. Go to Proverbs 16. Proverbs 16 and verse number 9. Proverbs 16, verse number 9. Proverbs 16, verse number 9 says, a man's heart deviseth his way. All right, so in your heart, you go, okay, this is what I'm going to do. This is the direction I'm going to go. This is the decision I'm going to make. But the Lord directeth his steps. Okay, so this is so important that we understand. Okay? Obviously, we want the Lord's direction. We want the Lord to help us in our life decisions, our goals, our New Year's resolutions. But first, you need to devise your way in your heart. Sit down, count the cost. Lord, is it your will? Is it good or is it sin? before I make this commitment, whatever it is, decision of life that I need to make, I have to devise in my heart. And look, if the Lord looks down and sees that his son or daughter is seeking his will, is doing the research, is counting the cost, all right? He sees all this. He's gone to counselors. He's trying to make the best decision that he can in life. When God looks down at that person and you say, okay, this is the way I'm going to go, God. God says, all right, good. I'll help you in your steps. So we're not removing God out of the equation, but God has given us instructions of how we make commitments, how we make decisions of life. And one last verse, please. Go to Proverbs chapter 3, please. Proverbs chapter 3, last one, that you're all very familiar with, of course. Proverbs chapter 3, verse number 5. You all know it. Proverbs chapter 3, verse number 5. It says, trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. In all thy ways acknowledge him. Say, Lord, I think this is the best way. I've done my research. I've counted the cost. I've gotten the counselors. I've sought your will, God. It's not a sin for me. This is a commitment. This is a decision that I'm going to make, Lord, and I'm just going to acknowledge you. I'm going to praise you. I'm going to thank you, Lord, and you will direct my path. God will step in and make sure it's the best decision that you've ever made. All right, brethren, the title for the sermon this morning was Making Oaths and Commitments. I hope you can take all of these lessons and apply it into your life. Don't unnecessarily speak the name of the Lord. Don't make commitments or promises that are outside of your control. Figure out what is in your control, okay? Figure out, is it in God's will? Do you have the ability? Do you have the resources? Have you gotten the counsel? You do things in the right way, and God will direct your paths. All right, brethren, let's pray.